we speak now to political analyst Sanusha Naidu for a little bit more on the frailties of some of these coalitions. Sanusha, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I suppose there was an inevitability in some of these coalitions, especially the ones that came together on the basis of getting another party out of the way.
Good evening, Peter, and good evening to the viewers. I mean, I think this whole situation in Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, and we've seen this come out of Nelson Mandela Bay as well. I mean, it tells you how fragile coalitions are and what the intention of coalitions are in terms of what is the purpose and what's the value proposition. Now, taking the Joburg fracas and the debacle as the kind of extension of that, you can see that it didn't take long for the coalition partners to come back and say we're going to oust the former mayor because we feel that these are serious issues that haven't been dealt with. But the issues that they're citing as things that haven't been dealt with are issues that have always been there. They've been manifesting themselves, if not deepening the socio-economic and the service delivery crisis of the city in terms of service delivery. But it's not something that has been just brought in the last 1.5 years after the local government election. So I think the problem here, or the challenge right now, is to what extent do coalition engagements and arrangements actually provide the kind of value proposition and the kind of intervention you want when you want to talk about a better run municipality and a more effective municipality, a receptive and a responsive municipality, but one that gets things done. And I see, and what has been very disheartening and disturbing at the same time is that in these couple of months that we've been looking at the Joburg municipality, the council, the breakdown of council meetings, the actual debates and discussions that have been had in those meetings, it seems as if they failed to realize that they got there because it was of the vote of the citizen or the electorate. It's as if they are there because they have essentially got there on their own power. And I think what we are beginning to see is a complete disaggregation, but also a very, very disturbing lack of understanding of what coalitions are supposed to achieve. And I think this is where the question about whether we should have a much more legislative framework governing coalitions needs to be discussed, and also in terms of aligning to the Electoral Reform Act.
What should citizens left thinking? I mean, I remember standing in the queue in the hot sun, and I'm shocked, to be honest with you, with what's happening, because as a citizen of the city, I didn't vote for this chaos. How do citizens respond?
Citizens are not essentially sea blind by everything. They're not muted. They're not essentially there just assuming that whatever comes their way, they'll continue to absorb and just accept this fracas, this circus that has become the local government and the council of Johannesburg, and what we see this then become replicated elsewhere. I think citizens have become much more astute. They've become much more streetwise. And I suspect that in the next election, if not by now, but by the next election of not necessarily local government, but in the 2024 national and provincial government, if there is, as we are predicting or as polls are suggesting, that a coalition, a national government, that the coalition will take place, and of course the provinces will also tend to move in that trajectory, I actually have a feeling that citizens are going to say, well, before you get to the point of deciding who your coalition partner is, I think we want to see how you play this out in a much more effective way. As a citizen, I would actually ask that when you come to my door to canvass for election or lobby for votes, when you actually have an election manifesto that you produce as your election manifesto going forward, I would be very keen and very, very serious about the fact that I would like the political parties and their leadership to have in those election manifestos a serious reference and a serious set of criteria on what constitutes their coalition strategy. And we need to understand that, because that becomes the way in which you want to say to these parties is, when you leave the vote, or once you get the vote and you leave and you start suddenly in this council and you are in the coalition, you become almost completely affected by the fact that the people who voted for you don't have any matter or any kind of reason to why you're here. And so we need to actually find the ways and means as civil society, as citizens, to say that this is what we want. But I'm looking for in the next election is who does have a coalition strategy, and how does that coalition strategy work, and how would we now need to think about aligning a legal coalition agreement that actually allows for the citizens' rights to be protected, and also not to allow this kind of licorice of all sorts of parties who suddenly jump onto the bandwagon of the ballot paper. Makes it completely difficult to read because of how long the ballot paper becomes, but also in terms of what kind of mandate we need to think about, and not allow them to become manipulated in coalition politics.
Does there need to be a change in the rules that govern what can be allowed to happen? Because we have a situation where a party has 3 seats in a council of 270, 9,000 votes in the entire city of Johannesburg, and yet they've been able to deliver a mayor. How is that allowed, in inverted commas?
Well, I think what happens is, once you have secured the votes, and this is where I think the real challenge, or the real crux of the matter is, and what really needs to be plugged in the context of what this does, is once you got the vote, you go into your sitting of establishing a coalition government, because you never got the first, the winner takes all approach. So you've got to now negotiate with different coalition partners or political partners. And that is why you end up in a situation of, just as you've just described, a mayor from a party whose party only has 3 votes in that council. And you're asking the question, how did this arrive? I think at one level, let's not assume that a mayor in that party would essentially, who comes from a smaller party, may not be right for the job. He could be right for the job. He could actually get things done. But I think what really concerns us, and what really makes the situation a little bit more vague and opaque, and just totally disaggregates the whole situation, is the fact that the person is now not beholden to the party, but is beholden to many benefactors who are pulling this mayor into all different angles and directions. And that becomes the key question. And how does he or she going to make sure that this mayoral post is not one that becomes compromised because of the vested interests of those that got the mayor there?
All right, perhaps as a final question, and if you can be brief, it's starting to look like national politics playing out when it really should be municipal stories, because you have a disagreement in one municipality and then they say, that's it, we're redrawing everything in all the municipalities that we have agreements.
Yeah, at this point in time, and where we are in the body politic of the state, it's very hard to disaggregate the national, the municipal, and the local government dynamics. But I think that's par for the course right now. But I think the challenge around that is, how do you disaggregate it, Peter? Because I think it's all kind of very convoluted, and in what some people would call a spaghetti bowl of overarching dynamics, where you really don't know how to disaggregate one from the other. So if we are able to get that right and say, this problem here is in this municipality, and therefore we want to sort that out, and it has nothing to do with national or nothing to do with local or whatever, that there's a serious crisis of governance here and this is what we want to do, then it makes sense. But unfortunately now we can see that the writing is on the wall. It's about getting back power, vested interests, and it's about me, myself, and I, and that's what it is. It has nothing to do with the interests of ordinary South Africans, or the service delivery interests of citizens in those municipalities and local government areas.
Sanusha, always good talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us tonight.
Pleasure, thank you.
All right, that's Sanusha Naidu, Senior Research Fellow, Institute for Global Dialogue, commenting on this situation, coalition politics, that seem to be changing things, who's in power, who's not in power, on a regular basis.